I'm Hannah Darroch and I'm really happy to be here as part of this video tips series ahead of this year's chamber music contest. I've been asked to talk to you today about rhythm and phrasing, and obviously this is a fairly big topic, so I thought I would just choose a few really simple tools that you'll be able to take away and practice both on your own and as an ensemble. So when we're thinking about rhythm, this is obviously one of the foundations of a piece of music. So it's something that we really have to have locked in before we can think about all those other layers of detail. So color, texture, shape, phrase, nuance, all of these other things. So the first tool involves that trusty friend that we all know and love, the metronome. There are lots of ways that you can use the metronome both by yourself and as an ensemble. And one thing that I highly recommend is that in your own practice before you're working together is to just use the metronome as a real piece of detective work in figuring out what your own natural tendencies are with rhythm. So for some people, this might be that you might tend to speed up or rush as you're playing faster notes. You might tend to drag after a tied note or after a breath mark. And these are all really important things to figure out on our own so that when we come to certain parts in music, we know what the likelihood is in terms of our own tendencies. And then when you come together as an ensemble, you're able to really have your ears open to everyone and not just yourself. And one other thing that I really love to do with the metronome is to get creative with how we use the beat patterns and not just be always putting the metronome on crotchets and playing something in 4/4 always on crotchets. So I'm going to give you a nifty little process that you might like to try as a group. And so what I've done here is I have my metronome on 120. You can obviously have it on whatever you need for your situation. And I'm going to play a short little phrase with the metronome, firstly on the crotchet pulse. So now we're going to up the stakes, and instead of the metronome being on the crotchet pulse, it's going to be on the minim, so on the half bar instead. So that is 60 in this case, and it will sound something like this. And now for the fun part, is instead of us essentially clapping on beats 1 and 3, we're going to use the same minim subdivision, but have the click falling on 2 and 4. Now this sort of adds the challenge for you as an ensemble to take responsibility for more of the beats, the inner pulse that you feel together, and also taking responsibility for the downbeat yourselves instead of relying on the metronome. And so that will sound something like this. So it sort of sounds a little more hip as well, which is nice. And from there, I encourage you to come up with your own subdivisions on whatever slow tempo your metronome is capable of. In this case, I had 120 crotchet, 60 was my half bar, and if I put my metronome onto 40, I can get a dotted minim, and that sounds like this. That one's a little more challenging. So moral of the story is use the metronome both to look after your own personal tendencies when it comes to rhythmic pulse, and to also have some fun as a group and challenge yourselves to really work on taking responsibility for that inner pulse that you have. The next thing that I will briefly talk about is the idea of subdividing. Now this can come about depending on what time signature you're playing in. You might have a piece that's in 6/8. You might be finding that the rhythm is a little rocky and you're not quite sure why. And it's worth having a conversation with your ensemble, because you may find that someone in the group is subdividing everything into 6 quavers, Meanwhile, someone else might be thinking in 2 dotted crotchets, and someone else may not have really given any thought to the subdivisions at all. And so you will find that this adjusts how the group feels tempo, and then that also obviously affects the phrasing. So I'll give you a slightly exaggerated example of something that's in 3/4, so this is in a waltz feel. And if you're thinking of every single crotchet beat, it's going to sound something like this. And if you have a conversation as an ensemble and you say, why don't we feel that waltz in 1 instead? It might sound more like this. So that was slightly exaggerated when I subdivided in crotchets, but you'll get that sense of a slightly longer line of phrase when you're not thinking of every single minute beat. And the final thing that I thought is worth mentioning today is this idea of who at any given moment in a piece is leading a phrase and who is following. There's a bit of a misconception perhaps in some ensembles that the first violin is always the person leading, or the first flute is always leading and the third flute is following. But in actual fact, it's important to remember that at any given moment, anyone could have that responsibility. So as an ensemble, I encourage you to just go through and have more of those verbal conversations about who is taking charge at any given phrase. Otherwise, we easily fall into the trap where everyone is sort of following each other and we wind up in these circles, and then none of the musical phrases can really go anywhere. So for example, if you are playing a very expressive melody, it might make more sense for you to lead the phrase. Or you could try it another way, where you have one of the inner parts that's playing something that's slightly more metronomic. Maybe they could try leading, and the melodic line over the top could fit in with that. And you may find that you go through different options and then together make those decisions as an ensemble. So I think when it comes to all of these decisions that we make about subdividing and phrasing and rhythm, that the most important thing to remember is that just have a conversation with each other, and these verbal conversations will then lead to more convincing musical conversations.